Hi everyone, good morning. Here's Sereno Sky again. It's almost a weekend, so I was trying to read you another chapter in case you may have some free time to listen to it. I'm reading from my novel Lonely Traveler. Here you have both of them because there's also a continuation, part two, which can be ordered on most online stores around the world in case you're interested to read the continuation of the book I'm reading you, Lonely Traveler. We're getting to chapter 11. It's called Realities, Good Vibes, and Meditation. Anne was lying there with her eyes wide open and in deep thought. Bernardo, have you ever thought of what you're going to do long term? Anne, I have told you before that I had visited a couple child centers to see about job opportunities there. Yes, I remember, but you didn't tell me why you didn't take the job. I hated that question. It put my whole being and my future into question in front of my eyes. It was hard enough asking myself that question, let alone having someone else ask me about it. After a few thoughtful moments, I said, I do know these kids need the help of loving people, especially on that one farm where a handful of orphans were staying. The lady who was in charge there had a lot of love for the kids. I could see that. But I was thinking that I would just be there helping these kids to become part of a society that I myself didn't really want to be a part of. I think right now I'm looking for some alternative ways to live, if they even exist. It might just turn out that there is no alternative to this society, or that it might be too difficult to live an alternative lifestyle. I guess I'll find that out. I could see certain sadness in Anne's eyes. If I ever have children, I would first want to find out what the goal in life is, what we are here for, and what moral code should I live by. Only then would I want to have children once I know that. I'm really looking for some answers to these questions and hope things will become a bit clearer soon. It was time for a positive thought. Well, Anne, I think what we discussed with Ben and Claire about facing reality has already really helped me. We need to take our lives into our own hands and make the best of it. Just blaming society and what they're doing or not doing isn't going to bring us any further. I could see her deep brown eyes looking at me, and her lips broke into a big warm smile. Her face was so lovely, and her long brown hair was like a gorgeous ornamental frame around her face. I knew I could fall in love with her, if she would let me. But I already felt blessed as it was. It was so good to have found a soulmate to travel with. Bernardo, she whispered, I like you more and more every day. Adding to the good mood we had gotten in was the fact that Ben had brought back some cold drinks. You guys are really sweet. We're happy to have met you. Anne told them. The pleasure is ours, Ben said while Claire smiled and nodded her head. It was getting really hot now, and we all lay down some more in the shade. Anne kept staring into my eyes, and I felt too much like kissing her when she looked at me like that. So I just closed my eyes and must have dozed off to sleep. I had probably slept for a couple of hours when I was woken up by the sound of drums nearby. The sun was still up, but it seemed like it was going to take a while until sunset. My stomach sent some signals, and I went to look for Anne to find out about dinner. She was sitting at the shore with Ben and Claire, and they had already been discussing about the four of us going for dinner together. We could get some paella. That idea definitely got me awake again, and the four of us started walking towards Casa Maria. Casa Maria, I was told, was pretty much the first restaurant where hippies came to eat at. There was another one next to it on the beach called Yaya, and there were some more restaurants in Hueltas, which was situated near the port, and where one could get fresh fish. Hueltas was about half an hour walk from our camp, but today we didn't feel like walking so far, so we settled for Yaya. The paella was delicious, and we ordered a large jar of chilled sangria with it. The nice thing about sangria is that it's very refreshing with ice and fruit juice in it. It doesn't only leave you with a buzz from the alcohol, but also kind of quenches your thirst. You'll see us drink this quite often as the story goes on. The sun had started to set by now, and we could hear the sound of drums and guitars coming in from the beach in front of Casa Maria. The few tables were full, and many people were standing around just having a drink and watching the sunset while listening to the hippie music. We were not planning on eating out every day, but now that we had just arrived, we still had quite some money, and we were really hungry. The food was incredibly tasty, the sangria was strong, and the sunset awesome. The drums and guitars fascinating, and the atmosphere at the table was happy and cheerful. We got to know lots of things about Ben and Claire. They had hitchhiked from Frankfurt, Germany, all the way down along the Spanish coast to Gibraltar, from where they had been able to get on a freighter very cheaply to cross over to Las Palmas on Gran Canaria. They had continued on over here on a couple boats. Ben had finished his master's degree and was thinking of going to study further to get his doctorate. Claire had already done 1 year of university studies, but took leave as she didn't really know which direction she should go with her studies. Both of them were fascinated by the hippie lifestyle. They had been together for nearly a year now and just wanted to get away from their regular situation for a while, in order to get their thoughts and lives sorted out. It must be quite reassuring to know what you want to do, I said to Ben. He replied. It's sort of laid out before me to go in that direction, but I don't like society. If I do continue to study medicine, I want to go help some poor people later on. That's what I would like to do as well, Ben. To help people in some way. That seems to be the only thing that's worth living for. I'm not going to work for the economy, even though that's what I've learned. The girls had gotten into a conversation of their own, and Ben said, I think the important thing is to not let oneself be driven by the desire for career and money, but to look for ways to contribute something positive in this world. Yet I think you're right, it has to come from within and not from something others want or expect of you. Claire must have overheard something, because she looked at me as if she had been reading my thoughts and said, Bernardo, don't compare your journey with Ben's. He seems to already have an idea of what to do and where to go with his life, and at the moment you don't. I myself don't know either, but I think each one of us has their own journey, their own destiny, and each one of us must try to find it at our own pace and time. It's not some sort of competition, it's your life. I smiled. I really like you for saying that, wise lady. I liked both of them. They were sweet and sincere, and I felt very comfortable around them. They seemed to emit a certain amount of maturity, and I was looking forward to getting to know them better. Claire seemed a bit like she could be Anne's older sister, and she had that same air of freedom and wildness, yet at the same time with both feet on the ground. It's a combination I really liked and admired in women. Claire had long blonde hair and blue eyes, and she wore this beautiful silky lilac-colored dress, which must have come from the East, and a necklace made of seashells. When she would look at you with her blue eyes, it was like you could see and hear the waves of the ocean and get lost. Ben had brownish, curly long hair, similar to the main singer in the movie Hair, and a 3 months long beard, as he probably hadn't shaved since he had left on this trip. He wore a brown leather vest, and the color of his skin was so brown by now that it almost matched the color of his vest. He wore this beautiful leather bracelet on his arm with blue and red gems, as well as bits of lava rock. It was nearly dark by the time we got back to Playa del Inglés, but we could still see the last shimmer of golden light across the sky where the sun had disappeared on the horizon. It looked like quite a lot more people had arrived today, and some were propped up on their backpacks and just taking a rest from the long trip. We sat a while longer with Ben and Claire in front of our stone enclosures, watching and listening to the waves. "There's this one hippie who brings coffee to the beach in the morning," Ben said. "That way you can get a coffee before having to get it in town. You just need to get up a bit earlier tomorrow." "I think I will. I feel rested up, and I am the kind of person that tends to get up quite early," I replied. Claire added, "We bought some fresh buns at Tienda Maria today, so we can have some breakfast together." That sounded great. Ben and Claire went over to their stone circle, and we could hear them giggling and kissing. Anne seemed to get a bit dreamy when she heard them. It's nice when people are so in love. I thought I was in love with Pierre too, but I found out it was more infatuation than love. She had gone back to the house one day as she had forgotten a painting that a customer wanted, and there she had found Pierre in bed with another girl whom she had never seen before. Anne hadn't told me the details before. It didn't hurt so much in an emotional sense, Bernardo. I wasn't that much in love or attached to him in that way, but it hurt that it was just going on without me knowing anything, and so I felt I didn't want to stay there any longer. I haven't been with anyone romantically or sexually since then. I've started to appreciate true friends a lot more, and I began to see friendship as something far more important. During my time in Switzerland, I had gotten a lot closer to my friend Jacqueline, the one who had told me about La Gomera. She helped me a lot in sorting out my mind about my broken relationship with Pierre. As I went to lie down for the second night, Anne was staying up a bit longer. I really liked her, not just as a friend. I didn't really know how she felt about me, but I started having real feelings for her. She was a beautiful girl, and there was a lot that attracted me about her looks. But her personality was what held the biggest attraction for me. I liked the way she thought about things so deeply, and her openness in formulating her thoughts. I liked the way she was so bubbly and alive, and the way she would get so enthusiastic and passionate about things she loved. Anne came to lie down too, and after a couple of minutes, I could feel her hand touching mine, and it felt so comforting and peaceful. Sometimes I feel like the stars are not just lights in the sky, but that they're trying to communicate with us. The stillness of the night can be so loud, she whispered. She really connected at night, while I was more the sort of person who connected in the early hours of the day. I woke up early the next morning. People around me in the other shelters and around the sand dunes were still sleeping, and there was no one up yet. It was a wonderful feeling to be living among all these lovely people, and it made me feel so much at home. It was a similar feeling to what I had experienced at Vondelpark in Amsterdam, but this time totally out in nature. I enjoyed getting up before everyone else did. There was something magical about that. You can reflect on your thoughts totally undisturbed while others are still asleep. You can hear the sounds of nature, which the tumult of the day shuts out. Only the first roosters on nearby farms make themselves to be heard, announcing a new day with such a joyous sound. At the far end of the beach, I noticed a guy strolling around, letting the waves touch his feet. The sun hadn't come up over the steep cliffs behind us yet, so it was still a bit chilly. I took my jacket and went along the beach, looking for pretty stones which the waves had washed ashore. Bill was his name. He was Canadian. He had been here for a year. The first hippies that had come here were Americans and Canadians. Many would move on to India and Nepal later on. More European hippies started coming down here then, he said. My brother had lived here for a few months, and then he moved on to Amsterdam, and from there he went on to India and Nepal. It must have been up in Amsterdam where word had spread about La Gomera. Amsterdam seemed to be indeed one of the main hippie communication centers in those days. Bill told me that he had started to make his own jewelry from lava rocks and nice stones that he had found here. He was making enough that way to get by. He had lived with a Spanish girl up on a finca, which is a piece of land with garden, and they had grown their own vegetables. Apparently, a few days ago they broke up, so he came back to the beach. I'm glad she hadn't gotten pregnant, or it would have been a lot more difficult to leave, he added. I didn't really know what to think about that, as I wasn't about to get anyone pregnant. And if it were to happen, this would be considered a serious matter and bring problems my way which I didn't even want to think about at this point. Well, it wasn't a problem for now, as I had been careful not to cause any accidents. And I could hardly remember the last time I had sex. I started wondering about that too. Bill was a very handsome guy, his skin tanned by the eternal sun here on the island, and he wore a cool jeans vest which someone must have had embroidered for him in a painstakingly beautiful work of oriental flowers. Wait until Anne sees this guy, I thought to myself. He certainly seemed to be a lot flashier than me, I thought. Perhaps I felt a bit insecure around people who knew what they were doing, or who had certain talents or looks which I didn't have. That may have added to the dilemma I had with my self-esteem in those days. But thankfully, I had started to realize that such comparing didn't really bring me anywhere, and that it was my own spiritual connection that would give me something to hold on to. I wanted to know more about the selling of jewelry and how he did it. I go sell them at Baby Beach and in Hueltas, or sometimes in front of Casa Maria. There are not just hippies coming here now. Main tourism has found its way down here as well. The tourists bring a bit more money than the hippies, and I want to bring some handmade souvenirs back home. My ex-girlfriend, who I have just broken up with, got me into this. We used to do all the jewelry at our finca and then sell it to the tourists. She still does it. We also sell some to the shops or at the hippie market. I was glad I had started talking to this guy. My friend Anne is very good at making stuff with her hands, and she has lots of experience in sales. Just go up to El Burro, it's the next village up the hill, and ask for Maria la Joyera, which means Maria the Jeweler. Everyone knows her. I was glad for this info, as Anne would probably be thrilled to get more info and access to people that were already doing it. When I got back, she was just getting up and I had exciting news for her. Wow, Bernardo, that would be a dream. At this moment, I saw the guy coming with 2 large thermos bottles and plastic cups hanging on him and thought this might be the coffee hippie that Ben had mentioned. Ben, are you awake? I think the coffee brother is here. So Ben and I went to organize some coffee for the 4 of us, and then we all enjoyed our little breakfast on the heap of black sand in front of our stone circle. We told them what I had just found out from Bill, and Claire said, anything that gets one so excited in the morning is always good news. Anyway, Ben and I decided that since we're running out of money soon, we'll return to Germany before we broke. We aren't really into producing anything that could bring us some money here. We had been talking half the night, and a lot of things had become a lot clearer to us regarding our future. It must be the waves and the stars. We were really happy for them, but a bit sad to hear they'll be leaving. But we'll stay a bit longer. We like you guys a lot and want to show you some of the places we got to know. Ben said, if you want, we'd like to walk with you to Hueltas today. On the way there, we could stop at Charco del Conde, where there is a nice little beach called the Baby Beach, probably because it's so small. But the nicest beach is at the port. It's called Playa de Hueltas. Let's go before the sun gets too hot. It's a bit of a walk. That sounded like an exciting excursion. So we walked through La Playa, passing by Casa Maria, where we had dinner the night before, and along the seaside through La Puntilla. The waves weren't high today, and there was a very peaceful atmosphere. The less noise the waves made, the more one could hear the birds. We passed by lots of banana plantations, and there were all kinds of other things growing in between. Tio Pepe sells fresh fruit and veggies. He's not open yet, but we can pick up some on the way back, Claire mentioned. Fresh mangoes, papayas, avocados, bananas and tomatoes, all sun-ripened. The waves at Playa del Inglés were just too high to go in all the way, so we had only splashed ourselves a little bit without really going into the sea. But we were all the happier to go in at Baby Beach, which was a small lake with large rocks blocking the sea. The waves were splashing fresh seawater into it continuously. It was very refreshing, and we were glad that we had brought our bathing suits. Because the tourists there were all properly dressed, as this one wasn't a nudist beach. Arriving at Hueltas, we noticed a few restaurants and bars as well, and a few hippie shops. The small streets were very fascinating. It looked like this was the old part of town. Playa de Hueltas was so beautiful with deep blue seawater and without the waves coming in. The shore was protected from the waves by the walls of the harbor, so one could do some nice swimming there. We could see all kinds of fish swimming around, and we even noticed a beautiful medusa floating along. They can really sting, but we weren't about to get that close to it. If one keeps their distance from them, they are beautiful to look at, and they won't swim up to you, at least not the kind we saw. They just float on the sea. A few wooden fishing boats in all kinds of colors were anchored in the bay, but there was still plenty of space to swim. The whole scene had one thing in common with Playa del Inglés: the high cliffs and mountains that were ascending right up from the sea behind the beach. There was a small road that had been carved at the bottom of the cliff, and Ben explained to me that it reached over to a beautiful finca. And right behind it, you can climb over this huge pile of rocks in order to get to the Bay of Pigs, with some natural caves where some hippies are staying. That must be fascinating, I thought. Have you been there, Ben? I asked. Yes, Claire and I went there one day. We had actually taken all of our stuff with us, as we thought we may stay there for some time. We only ended up staying one night, as it's a bit far from everything. If you need a bottle of drinking water or anything, you have to go all the way back to Vueltas each time, climbing over rocks and walking right on the bottom of this steep cliff where rocks could fall down any time. I was at least hoping to get to see those caves in the future and see who lives there. Bernardo, the people who live there are probably of the kind that like to be a bit secluded. You are far too social for that, Anne mentioned. Well, maybe it would do me good to go into some seclusion again, I replied. The times I had gone into seclusion had really helped me in finding a spiritual connection, and it had done me a lot of good each time. Lately, I had found my times of quietness mainly in the mornings, by getting up early and going on a stroll, and then sitting down somewhere to meditate and pray. I am indeed the kind of person who needs people around, and I can't be away from people for too long. How about you, Anne? Claire asked. Well, in that sense, I'm a bit like Bernardo. I can't be alone for too long either. But I do take time to meditate and pray often in the evening before going to sleep. I realized she might have stayed up doing that the night before, when she didn't come to sleep right away. And that's end of chapter 11. I wish you a lovely weekend.